Welcome to Season 2, Episode 8.
He was here.
Before we get into it, let's cheers our claws. Cheers, girl.
Cheers.
So a little content warning for today's episode. We're talking about stillbirth. And we just want to say that up front so that anybody who might be listening who has experienced this knows what's coming and is able to take care of themselves while listening to the episode. So small content warning, but we were really honored for this episode to be in the presence of this woman, Shafina. She's our photographer.
Yes.
And just a really incredible human being who experienced a stillbirth.
Yeah, yes. And I know it's so fucking hard to listen to talk about, but this shit happens and we need to talk about it and we need to shed light on this. And Shafina was so generous with her story and her experiences to share with others that I'm just really grateful that we had her here for this.
Me too. And I think what's really important, and I want everyone to hold this in their mind as they listen, is that by recording this episode, by talking to Shafina, by putting this out there, we are bearing witness to the fact that her child was here.
Yes.
He existed. And I think that's just really important to say. So Shafina is joining us today to tell us about her experience with stillbirth, which is a really big topic. We're so grateful for you to be here.
Thanks for having me. I love your podcast and I love what you guys are doing, so I'm honored to be here with you guys.
Well, thank you.
We thought it was very important to bring you on today because I think a lot of women may experience this or be fearful of experiencing it, and perhaps you can lend some guidance for anybody. So why don't we start with, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself? How about that?
Yeah. Okay. Who are you outside of this trauma that happened? Because we always like to help people remember that, yes, in life we experience hard and traumatic things, and we are more than just the traumas that we experience. So who are you outside of this, and then we'll get into the story.
For sure. I feel like when I get asked this question, the corest identity that that resonates with me is that of a mom. And it's connected to this story, but also I'm the mom of, two other children, Koa and Kamari, and I feel like everything I do is through that kind of lens. So, I'm a executive at a consulting firm, and I do photography, in my spare time, but I'm a friend and a sister and a mom, and I don't know what else to say.
That's a lot.
So, I mean, you do so much, and it sounds like your kids are really like your why, like they're your heart.
Totally.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's really beautiful, and I think it highlights probably why it feels so important for you to tell your story of this child who you are also a mom to, who didn't get to stay.
Yeah.
And we were wondering if you could start out with just sharing with people why you think it's important for us to talk about stillbirth and, maybe to some extent miscarriage. I know it's two different things, but it's really hard to talk about. You're being so courageous in doing so. So why did you want to come share this really hard experience you had?
Yeah. I don't think we talk about this enough. I think for me, I've said before, I didn't even know, I didn't know what stillbirth was. It wasn't in my frame of that this is something that happens until it happened, and then I was so unprepared for it. I think I had Koa was born at 32 weeks, so I knew that babies could come early, but I didn't know that babies can die. and they can die before they're born, and that's something.
Yeah.
And so, I think we are afraid to talk about things that feel hard, and I think it happens to more people than we realize. 1 in 4 women will have a miscarriage, which is typically defined as like anything before 20 weeks.
Okay.
And 1 in 160 will have a stillbirth, and that's 20 to 40 weeks. Our son Kyrie was 34 and a half weeks, so we were at the end felt in sight. And we had passed where our first son was born, and he's healthy. So we knew that like at 34 and a half weeks, babies should live. And learning that it was hard to learn that. It was like a traumatic and heartbreaking experience. And yet there's a lot of women who have that same experience, and you don't know because we don't talk about it.
Right.
So I think for me, wanting to share my story is about, there's always, I think, a little bit of healing that happens when people have an opportunity to share a story. And also just to I think, to bring light to it. We're not talking about it.
Yeah.
And why not?
Right. It is so heavy, and there are 1 in 4, 1 in 160. I mean, that is a lot of women.
It's a lot of people
that have pregnant women that have had to, go through this, and, there's so much to be talked about. When did you know that did you know that you're going to have a stillbirth?
Yeah, so everything in the second pregnancy had been going pretty fine. We were monitoring this pregnancy closer because Koa had been born at 32 weeks. So we were trying to, stay pregnant as long as possible. I think I was taking like progesterone injections every week or so after a certain amount of time. And we were, I could check in with the doctor anytime. I had a great team who was, overseeing this pregnancy. And what happened was, one evening I just hadn't felt him move a whole bunch. And so I was feeling a little nervous about that.
Yeah.
Talked it up to, it's nothing. I think I was like telling myself it's not a big deal. I'll just go in the morning. And I called the doctor in the morning and said, hey, can I just come in and I want to hear his heartbeat, which was a normal thing for us. Like they had said, come in anytime you want. I went in that morning, I called my work, I was on my way to S2Ep. And I called and I said, I want to swing by the doctor's office first. And because I felt like, I think the only thing I thought that could happen was that I was going to have the baby early. Because that I knew was possible. But I didn't understand stillbirth. I didn't understand that babies could die, that it wasn't, it
in
just,
the womb,
right,
like
yeah,
that.
it wasn't, it was not in my frame. And so when I got there, I saw like my favorite nurse was working, who I, love her. We went back in, she, was looking for his heartbeat. And I feel like in those moments I laid there and she said, just turn over, on your side, like having me move, and I could see her struggling. And I think at that point I knew something was wrong, and tears just started. I think I just laid there and she was like, it's okay. Like we're gonna, just hold on, because I don't think it's normal. It's normal in that it happens in 1 in 160 women, right? But it's not an everyday occurrence, I think, even in a doctor's office.
No.
So they're so invested in you also, and have been caring for you. She brought another nurse in, and they kept trying, and then the doctor came in, who was not my regular doctor that I had been seeing, but I had seen her before. And at that point, I think I was just a mess.
Were you by yourself at that point? You hadn't like called your husband or anything yet? Okay.
It was so fast. It happened so fast because they were like trying to find the heartbeat, and then
then you went in like, I just want to hear it, and then I'm gonna go to work.
And then I'm gonna go to work.
And
she sat next to me, and she had turned off the thing, and she held my hand and she said, Shafina, I'm just so sorry, but there's no heartbeat.
Oh fuck.
And it was like, I think I just lost it. It was so hard, and I remember like just hugging the nurse who was with me for so long, because I was just so devastated. And then my phone rang, and it was my husband.
Oh, shit.
And he was just calling to like check in. And so he, you know, I can't speak for his story, but his story started with a nurse answering my phone for me and saying, you need to come here. And I think he thought that the baby was coming early because, again, we didn't know that that could happen.
Yeah.
So, you know, at that point, they had me go and they did a bigger ultrasound, you know, a more like the regular kind of big ultrasounds, and confirmed it. And I think at that point I was like, are you sure? Are you sure? Like, my brain couldn't process it.
Yeah.
It was just too much. It was too much. And then, you know, we met with the maternal, I don't know, the doctor that works with higher risk pregnancies. And she was very matter of fact about what's going to happen next. And so that's, I mean, you're getting so much information is flooding to you. You want to know why. You don't get to know why. You just get to know that, all right, you're 34 and a half weeks pregnant, belly out to here, you know, and your baby's died.
Yeah.
And now here's your options for how to get your baby out, because you have to give birth.
Oh, God.
And so it's just a lot. My husband was with me at that point, and we, you know, were listening to our options, and you know, later that night we would check into the hospital to kind of start the process of giving birth to our baby.
Damn.
What was it? What were those moments? Just, you know, you're taking in all this information that makes no sense about something that you didn't even know could happen. What were those early moments like between the two of you? If that's not too personal, but I'm just thinking about what it's like to like be taking that information in as individuals, and then as a couple, as people who love each other, as the parents of this child.
Yeah, I think we were both just so heartbroken. And trying to make sense of it. You know, I think like Craig came into it unknown, right? Like he didn't know what was happening. He got there, you know, thinking that maybe baby is coming early.
Right.
And then, you know, it wasn't until I said, there's no heartbeat. And he just broke down, you know? And so like his grief process has looked so different than mine. And in those moments, I think we could just be there for one another, you know, and like hold each other and cry. And after we got the, you know, technical instructions of what is happening, we had to leave in our separate cars because we had come at different times, and we had to coordinate. We had a 5-year-old at that time. And we had to figure out, how do we explain this to Koa? How do we, you know, who do we call? And called like my best friend on the way home, because we had to pack and then talk to my brother and my sister and my mom, and it was just a flurry of things.
Totally. I mean, your whole life just got rocked in like an instant. That's a lot.
Yeah. So we like, you know, we went to the hospital, and the hospital staff were wonderful and considering. And the next day when we would have him. So and it was like a natural birth. I mean, I had an epidural, but we you know, had him. And I remember my family was there. They had come, and the nurses were wonderful, like had taken a room next to us and like brought them food and let everyone come. So my whole family, my cousins and my you know, immediate family were able to be there. And then it was just Craig and I in the room when we had him. And it was hard. It was so heartbreaking. It was like, you expect to give birth and hear a baby cry, and it's quiet.
And you knew that before,
and you know it.
Before even giving birth, you knew that was coming.
Yeah.
Which is a whole nother thing than giving birth and then having a stillbirth, you know, like you knew, like that's, all of this is horrible,
Yeah.
you know, and it's a whole nother thing when you know what's gonna come.
Yeah.
And to not hear that, and, oh.
Yeah.
And you gave it, so you gave birth, vaginally, or
Yep.
naturally.
Yep.
And so you had to have the whole contractions and labor and all of that.
Yep. They gave me Pitocin to start,
Mhm.
you know, labor the night before. And then, you know, by the morning, I think I finally got to see my doctor. And she was like, you get an epidural at this point because it was starting, like the contractions were happening.
God, so you had to go through all of that, plus the emotional pain,
I'm just thinking,
physical pain.
yeah, like the splitting that your mind must have been doing. And I think if it was me, I would have been in total denial. Like, well, I'm giving birth. It feels like I'm giving birth. Like, maybe there's a chance that they're
Totally.
wrong.
They're totally.
Yeah.
I believed that. There was a
Yeah.
part of me that was like, I'm like, they'll be wrong. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
he's gonna be alive. There was always been that hope, and I think that's the hardest part of the grief was like there's so much, you know, even holding him. I was like, if I hold him, I know there's stories that like, you know, mothers who like hold their babies on their chest and they'll wake up. And even though I knew like he was no longer here, holding his body, like I wanted him to be alive so badly
Yes,
that like
of course.
in my mind, I think I needed to think like maybe this could happen.
Yeah, like a
It's like,
miracle, like
yeah,
something magical.
Something magical is gonna
Yeah.
happen, even though it's like so not real, right? But like, I think you're just trying to cope so much with what is happening, that it's impossible not to be in that kind of bargaining. Like, I'll do anything to make you come back. What can I do? What can I do? Yeah. I mean, we one of the things that I think people maybe don't realize when you have a baby who has died is nowadays, in the past where they maybe didn't let you hold your baby and keep your baby
Or
with
even
you
see them, yeah.
or see them, now it's really seen as something you should do. And I know for some women they can't, for whatever reason, they don't want to see their baby, or they and maybe they're okay with it and maybe they regret it later, I don't know, but for me, I needed to be with him.
Yeah.
I would have held him till there was nothing left of him. I would have, like, I needed that, and they let me. They were so kind and loving, the nurses that we had, helping like wash his body and like, you know, put a hat on him and take pictures of him and like allow you to mother him or to parent him for as long as you needed. At night they put the little, you know, bassinet next to me, so we could sleep, and this was a hard part for Craig because his body was changing. Like, our bodies aren't, when we die, our bodies aren't meant to be out for long,
Right.
you know?
Yes.
And yet I wanted so badly, I couldn't imagine him being in the hospital without me. I couldn't send him away and stay. I was like, I can't do that. He has to be with me. And so that was a moment that I really appreciated from Craig, because I know it was really hard for him to see our baby change. And I needed it so badly. That just meant so much. And so, you know, in the night I brought him to me and I literally held him like this in my arms all night. And it sounds weird. I feel like I wanted to like inhale him. I wanted to like remember every single thing about him.
Yeah, it's not weird. He was so much a part of you. I mean, he was growing inside of you.
Yeah.
You know, you wanted him back inside, you know?
Yeah.
It makes total sense, you know?
Yeah.
I don't think that's weird at all. I mean, what you just said, like, I would have held him till there was nothing left, like that. I think that says it all.
Yeah.
And I think anybody would have had this, many people would have had the same reaction. You're right, maybe some people would just need to completely shut it down in order to survive the moment.
Yeah.
It's wonderful that parents are allowed to stay with their baby as long as they need, and that they're not just like whisked away and you're just left there to lay and recover with, like, with knowing that there's a baby somewhere in the hospital that's yours and you don't get to know where they are.
Right.
Or see
Yeah.
them, see what they look like, anything.
Yeah. And I mean, we were lucky with the nurses we had. The night that the day that I gave birth, the nurses that came on that morning were phenomenal. Like I know her, like we have met her again, and to thank her because she was so, like, such an amazing part, an important part of our story. And we had some experiences that weren't like as loving as she was, and so I think like how there's an opportunity there for, you know, when we think about how do you care for mothers who are going, or families who are going through this, it's so hard.
Yeah.
To know how to like show up for people in that way.
Where do you think the like medical field or the labor and delivery field needs to like kind of catch up to the reality of how to like support a traumatized person?
I think because you're so aware that what is happening right now is different, I think there's a level of like, not defensiveness, but protection, mama bear instinct to ensure that anyone who's looking at your baby understands that like this is a real baby. They are beautiful. They are like, they look normal. Like this is like, there's so much of a desire, I think, to protect, that people, I think, and it's heightened. So I think how you enter a room, what you say, if you look uncomfortable, is it because of my baby? Are you judging me? Are you judging that I'm sleeping with him? Is that weird to you? Or like, is what I'm doing wrong? There's so much questioning, I think, of yourself that doctors and nurses, I think, need to know. If they know that, then how you enter into the space might be different. And I think listening to what, you know, your patient is requesting and what they need is obviously like the most important thing to do. I think they do a great job at like where we, you know, I think there's like special signs on the door so people know this is what is happening in this room. And like I said, like before we even had the photographers who came to take photos of our baby with us, our nurse wasn't sure they were going to come, and she went and got her camera and took photos for us so we could have those and put them on a CD and gave them to us. So like there are some folks like her who are doing, I hope everyone who has to go through something like this has that kind of support in the hospital.
From that moment forward, what did your life look like?
Yeah, nothing was the same. I feel like I am not the same person I was before. I think there was a level of I don't want to say jadedness, but there was something that was like lost. You know, I mean, literally, right? But then there was something that I just saw the world differently. And I would say in the immediate year, like that first year was probably, it's a blur, you know, in some ways. It's like, how did I survive that year? I think I must have just been walking through motions. But there was so much sadness, right? There was so much like blame and wondering about myself and what I did wrong or what could I have done. There was like, it just shows up in the weirdest ways. I wanted to know everything there was to know about stillbirth. I was like, if there was a movie that came out about like a baby who died, I needed to see it. God bless my best friend who would like go with me. I think she was like,
all these really sad movies.
I think she was like, I don't know if this is a good thing. And I was like, I have to see it. I have to see it. I have to believe that there's something else. And if a movie can tell me that there's some other life that I will see my baby in, then I need to see it. Even if it's a Hollywood production. I mean, I just needed that. So that first year was all sorts of like emotions and sadness, and you know, for folks who were trying to support me, I think there was like there was no winning, right? Like there was nothing they would get right, because nothing was right with me, right? Like there was nothing that could make anything better,
right?
Because the only thing that could be better is if he was here, and that would never happen. So there was a lot of that, and I think what I was blessed with was that I had people who never kind of gave up trying to figure out what it is that how could they show up for me, and what was it that I needed. And so I had good support too. Like a lot of the women in my life, I think, were very supportive and wanting to talk and make space for me and whatever it was that I needed. And so I wrote a lot, I blogged a ton. That first year, I read like I found like a woman's blog, and I read it from like in one night, I think, from start to finish, and she had a similar experience, and her posts became less frequent, and she had children. And so I was like, read this whole thing, and I was like, I just needed to be connected to others who were going through that.
Something to grab onto.
Totally.
But I think what you just said is so important for people supporting a grieving person to remember. Like, you can't win. No one can win grief, and you're all looking for answers, the grieving person and their loved ones, to something that just doesn't have an answer. You know? So like you just have to go through that amount of time, however long it is, where you're grasping at whatever thing that you're grasping on, or whatever thing you've latched onto that becomes like, this is going to show me the answer. It's probably not, but it's the thing that you're grabbing onto right now. And I'm so glad you had people and have people in your life that were patient with you, because it does seem like our culture wants to like put a time limit on grieving. Like the bad thing happens and the clock starts ticking for like when your grief is allowed to take up space, and when you have to like go back to quote unquote normal.
Yeah, I feel like that is been something that I've been navigating over the last couple years, where the first year, and even into the second year, I think there was a lot of like, a lot of questions and a lot of like folks available, and it's trickled. My family has never wavered, my close friends have never wavered, but how people respond, I think, does change, and you learn to adjust to that, and it hurts still, because I think what's important for moms with stillborn babies is that like you say their name, that you remember that they were there, like they're a baby.
Right.
I can't, like, the hardest thing is to think that people would forget him, or think that he could be replaced with a new baby, or like maybe she's okay now, or anything like that, or it's been 5 years, why does she still post about it, or whatnot. And so I think there's I've been really open with my grief over the last 5 years. I post on social media about him. I talk about him openly, and I don't know how that makes people feel necessarily anymore. I think you're right. I think society puts a timeline on how long you're allowed to grieve, and when you're supposed to, from how much time you get for leave, for bereavement leave.
I know.
To
2 days.
Yeah.
You're like, okay.
Oh, you're better now, right?
Yeah.
To like, it's been a few years, you're fine now. Or, people who don't understand stillbirth, or think like, who want to compare grief or something, like, well, he wasn't really born, so, is it,
Please tell me
is
that
it something?
No one actually said that to
No.
Like, taking off my earrings, give me their name. Like, who was it? Okay.
No, but I think that exists for so many people.
I'm sure,
right?
yeah.
That like,
Totally.
that you don't get to grieve as long because it wasn't someone else. It wasn't like, and I hate that comparison of like, women who lose babies before 20 weeks, to women who lose babies now, to women who lose babies when they're older.
Right.
It's a different experience, and I would never ever compare my experience to any other woman's experience. It's all valid. And I think what connects us all, though, is that experience of grief, and that process, whether it's loss of a friend or a partner or whatever that loss is. I think that experience of grief is connecting and resonates. The sadness I can connect to anyway.
For sure. For sure. And I feel when people do try to say or limit your grief or feel uncomfortable and say shit like that, I mean, I think that just comes down to their own uncomfortableness or discomfort with it, you know. It has nothing to do with you, nothing to do with your loss, nothing to do with anything but their own discomfort of like, what am I supposed to do with this? You know, you're supposed to, you're supposed to be fine and like, you know, let's go out and whatever. You know what I mean? Like, please me, you know, right now, kind of thing, you know. But you're just like, no. I mean, that's like where you can kind of decide who your real friends are.
Yeah. I mean, I think you really do see who sticks around and who says things. I'll say, like, I was really surprised with some folks who reached out who are in my community, but like not directly like I hang out with them all the time, but who continue to show up in a way, whether they're donating to, you know, we do March of Dimes every year for Kyrie, like whether they donate to that, to whether I get a card in the mail, to a text message because they put it in their calendar. Like there are people who have really surprised me, and those moments mean so much because it doesn't take that much time to put it in your calendar, and to, if that can mean something to somebody else, that you remember their baby's name or you remember their anniversary, those little moments go a long way, especially over time, right? Like when you don't expect to hear it as much, you know, from folks.
Right, because it just shows that they don't forget, and you definitely will never forget, you know. And it's just to know those dates, you know, and like, oh yeah, then you know whoever knows you too also is around you during those times, you know, his anniversary or leading up to that, you know. I wonder if you've had any sort of you know, leading up to that date in February, even now, do you get anxious? Do you get...
Oh, yeah. I feel like our bodies remember. And I feel like it's a season, right? Like February starts to come near and I start to feel it in my bones. That's never gone away. I think the lead up is always harder than the next day. It's like the very next day I can like, okay, I can move, I can keep moving on. But the lead up has been something that I've learned to like take time off, take a couple of days off from work leading up to it. Give yourself space to process and to reconnect, what feels like reconnect to those feelings. Like for me, I need to, for that first year, I felt like I had to be sad because it was the way to be close to him. And if I leave that sadness, I'm somehow leaving him. And that feels like, how could I do that? Even to the point of like, I need to sit where his ashes are in the same room and be close. And if I like, there's that feeling. And so, you know, the weeks leading up to it, I feel like I need to reconnect to that somehow. And so I might write in the blog again or give myself time to look through pictures and just try to like find some time, because I find myself when I don't give myself that time, I feel resentful of all the reasons why I didn't, you know, whether it's work or whatever. And so now I've just learned that, nope, I take a week off before. That's just part of what we do. And we put our energy into really wanting to do something to honor him. And so every year we do something on his anniversary, my family, and my husband and I and Koa, you know, this year we decided that he would have been entering kindergarten, and what we wanted to do is we donated a whole building block station for the kindergarten class at our local elementary, and every year now we're going to follow that class in where he would have been and do something that will be meaningful. We built a little plaque that says like, I think, build the impossible, you know, in honor of Kyrie and then the date, like Love Gardner family. But doing stuff like that, like we participate in the March of Dimes and we raise money for, you know, to hope that women don't have this experience in the future. Those are all things that allow us to put our energy into doing something with this. That's been really, I think it's healing, and it feels like we're doing something good.
Yeah, and then and
with
his
it.
name and his experience and your experience as well. You
Yeah.
know,
and it's good for Koa. It's so
Yeah.
good for
Yeah.
Koa.
Yeah.
Like he has his own story.
Yeah.
You know, and he was 5. He knew exactly what was happening.
Totally.
We met him. He, you know, we talked very concretely about what happened. And like he was with us in this year of like incredible sadness that first year. And so he is probably the most empathetic and like sensitive and loving kid there is. And I think a lot of that is because of what he's experienced, for sure.
I love what you're doing in his honor, or, you know, creating experiences. You know, we can't take away what has happened, and we can continue, you know, what we can do is try to create experiences to help with that story, you know, change the narrative, I guess, you know, or however you want to word it, where, yeah, it's horrible and it's sad and it's should never happen, but it did happen, and now what do I do with this, you know? And I think with all, like, a lot of horrible things, you know, you can, at some point you have to decide, you know, how long to, I guess, suffer, I guess you can say that. I love the idea that you have decided to put in other memories every year, you know. Every year there's a new memory of something great, something in his honor. You know, you're still remembering him, but in a different way. Like we did this on his anniversary, you know, so you're not just remembering the day that horrible day that happened, but you're remembering 5 years of the last 5 years of something you guys have done as a family in honor of him. And those will get ingrained, and, you know, because it's all what we do with all this shit that fucking happens to us, you know. What do we do with all of this, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's like the story of him gets to keep growing and be bigger. And someone was talking to me recently, I don't even remember who, about suffering being part of life and figuring out how to like suffer wisely, which is like sort of I had to sit with that for a while, like after that conversation. But it strikes me that like that's the way that you're approaching this, like it's very wise, and he's very much a part of the family, and I think that's really beautiful that like his memory extends beyond just what happened.
Yeah, you keep him alive in that sense, you know, his memory, his energy, his beingness, you know, because I honestly don't believe that we're just matter, you know. So seeing that ripple effect from his birth, or, you know, from his story, and how it's the ripple effect going out affecting so many other lives, like, you know, I think it's a beautiful thing, you know, because it's still going and going, and because of you, you know, because you and your family have decided to, you know, to create something beautiful out of this horrific tragedy, you know.
Thank you. I feel I love that. I think it's taken time.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I think when I think of other women who are going through this or are hearing this kind of news, you know, now it's like, I always say, like, feel all the feels, and there's no wrong or right way to grieve, and there's no timeline. There doesn't have to be a timeline to your grief. So if sitting in the sadness is what you need to do, then sit in the sadness. And if, you know, working your butt off to like not think about it is whatever it is you need to do. And I'm when I think back to that time, I know how hard it was, and I'm grateful that time, in those moments I didn't want time to move, I needed it to stay still. And I can see now, I'm so grateful that time has moved, because it's allowed us to process things and to do exactly what you're saying, and to honor Kyrie in different ways, and to ensure that his memory like has impact, the kind of impact that we want to see. So
I was gonna ask, actually, if you have advice for that 1 in 160 women that will have to go through this, you know. You've probably learned a ton. Like, what would you say to somebody getting this news, or somebody just freshly through this experience?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I think it is, I can't say, like, don't blame yourself, don't do these things, right? Because they're gonna do, like, you have to feel whatever you need to feel.
Right.
And I think it's so important for people to know that there's nothing wrong with what you're feeling. There's nothing wrong with how you choose to give birth. There's nothing wrong with your choice to parent in the hospital. There's nothing wrong with how you choose to grieve or what you choose to share. That, like, all of it is normal. Because I think we question everything, and none of it is your fault. We don't have a reason for why this happened. We'll never have a reason. There's no medical reason for it. There's nothing I did, but believe me, I was like, it's the coffee, I drank too much coffee, I did all the things. It's not gonna do any good to sit in that space of blame. So if you need to do it for a minute, do it for a minute, take a deep breath, and now what else can you do? So I think just giving yourself grace and giving yourself time and knowing that you're normal, anything that you feel and say, it's fine. You're allowed to feel, you're allowed to not want to be around babies, you're allowed to not want to be around pregnant people, you're allowed to say what you want to say about it and then change your mind later. Like, you're allowed all those things. And my hope is that people can find that one person or multiple people who can support them in that and not judge them. And so on the flip side, what can people do to support their friends or people who is to be there and to be, like, to not give up checking in, to not tiptoe around because you're worried you might make them nervous or you're not sure. Ask, say the name, say, I want to be here for you, but I don't know what the fuck that looks like, but I love you and I want to be here. Sit next to them, cry with them, go to those movies that they want to go to, like, whatever it is, just be there and don't forget.
Thank you for that. I think all of that is so, as somebody who has definitely gone through, the grieving loss of somebody, it's helpful for others to share what, it's very similar across the board of what the needs are. And that the main theme is just fucking be there. You know what I mean? Like, no matter how uncomfortable you might be feeling or awkward or, you don't know what to say or what not to say or whatever, like, just be there. Just check in. Just, because, and don't take it personal. Don't take it personal. It's like, okay, you're here, but, I don't want you here. You know what I mean? I don't want you here right now, but I appreciate it. You know what I mean? Don't take that personal. Give us grace as well. Give the grievers grace,
I thought I wanted you here, but now you're here, and I just want you to leave.
And you leave. So
I just needed to know that you're going to show up.
So you come back tomorrow.
But I think it's so important just, like, for everything to just be so fluid and let it flow and not to put any fucking rules on anything or restrictions or, and just give everyone grace in this whole process because nobody knows, what the fuck to do. And in a sense, we are all connected and we're all in this together, whether you are the griever or the friend of a grieving person, So grief, it's horrible and it's lifelong, and it's just figuring out how to, like Megan has mentioned before, live side by side with grief and not let it consume you and you consume your life. Obviously, you're going to go through the process as you will. Yes, get fucking sad, scream, or ignore it all or whatever. It's going to come back. It's going to be there. It's always there.
Shafina, we just wanted to end by asking if there's anything else that you want to share about your son, because he was here.
Yes.
And we want to honor that and give you space to say anything that you want to say or that you want people to know about him.
Kyrie was he was here, right? Like he was real. He was our baby, and he's our light. We say, like, we see you in the light of the sun, we feel you in our soul. And that's because we feel like when we said goodbye to him, on a cloudy day and the sun suddenly shone through, we feel like that was our sign from him, that he's okay. I
could feel Kyrie's energy and the love and the beautiful spirit, like, I don't know, and how you continue to honor him and do things in his name for him and spread his name out there, and that energy, that beautiful energy, because of course you felt it when he was inside of you, growing him. You create a relationship with I could only imagine, I've never had a child, but I could only imagine that you can sense the type of energy or the type of being that you're growing inside of you, and when you saw him and everything, it's just a release of like that energy and that spirit and that soul,
He's so loved by so many, and he was so wanted.
Well, thank you for sharing him with us today.
Yes.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing you and your
my
story
gosh.
with us today. It means so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad that we were able to do this.
Yes, us too. I mean, this is a heavy fucking experience, heavy everything, that a lot of people don't talk about, don't want to talk about, don't want to hear about, but there's so many people that do want to hear about it and just relate and be the one who reads a blog all night long because they want somebody to connect to and know that they're not alone in this experience, that there's nothing that they fucking did wrong, and there's nothing that they're doing wrong. They just want that, So what you're doing today is just very honorable to you and brave and generous of your time and your, all of it. Whoever is going to be listening to this, here it is again, Kyrie spreading his energy out there, So, yes.
Listeners, if you have a similar experience and after listening to this episode you feel like you want to talk about it, we're open. Please join us in hearing the lessons that Shafina has shared. Please join us in sharing your stories, and Shafina, nothing but love to you and your family. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye everybody. See you next week.
See you next week.